Listen carefully right now, because what you are about to hear is not a coincidence, and it is not random timing, and it is not something you clicked on by accident, because last night when the room was quiet and nobody else could hear your voice and nobody else could see your tears and nobody else understood the weight you were carrying in your heart, you whispered a prayer that only heaven could hear, and maybe you thought it disappeared into silence, and maybe you thought nobody noticed, and maybe you even wondered if God was still listening after everything you have been through. But the truth is, God heard every single word you whispered, and He did not ignore you, and He did not turn away from you, and He did not delay your answer because He forgot about you, but because something bigger is already moving behind the scenes of your life right now. And what you felt last night was not weakness, it was not desperation, and it was not the end of your strength, but it was the beginning of a shift that heaven has already started preparing for you even before you opened your mouth to pray. Because there are moments in life when your voice becomes quiet but your spirit becomes loud, and heaven responds more to what your heart feels than what your mouth says. And last night your heart spoke louder than you realize, and God was already leaning close to listen, because the kind of prayer you prayed last night was not ordinary, and it was not routine, and it was not something spoken without purpose. But it was a prayer that came from a place inside you that only appears when your soul reaches a turning point, and when that kind of prayer rises, heaven never ignores it, and something begins to move even when your situation still looks the same this morning, and even when nothing around you appears different yet. Because sometimes the first sign that God has heard your prayer is not something you see, but something you begin to feel deep inside your spirit, where peace slowly replaces fear, and strength quietly replaces doubt, and hope starts returning to places where discouragement once lived. And what you are experiencing right now is not imagination, and it is not coincidence, but confirmation that God was already working while you were still whispering His name in the dark. And there are seasons when God answers immediately, and there are seasons when God answers quietly, and there are seasons when God answers by changing everything around you. But there are also seasons when God answers by changing something inside you first, because what He is preparing to do in your life cannot arrive until your spirit is strong enough to carry it. And that is why last night mattered more than you think, because something shifted when you decided to pray instead of staying silent, and something changed when you chose to trust instead of giving up, and something powerful began the moment your whisper reached heaven, even though your eyes could not see it yet. And maybe you went to sleep still carrying questions, and maybe you woke up still feeling unsure, and maybe part of you is still wondering if anything is really going to change. But what you do not realize yet is that answers often begin forming long before they become visible, and breakthroughs often start growing long before they become obvious. And what feels like silence right now is actually preparation happening in a place you cannot see, because God does some of His greatest work in hidden places where doubt cannot interrupt the process, and fear cannot stop the timing, and people cannot interfere with what heaven has already decided to release into your life. And there is a reason your heart felt heavy enough to whisper that prayer last night, and there is a reason your spirit refused to give up even when everything around you suggested you should, and there is a reason you are hearing this message right now at this exact moment, because heaven responds to persistence even when persistence sounds like a whisper instead of a shout. And what you called a quiet prayer last night, heaven called a powerful moment of faith. And what you thought was the end of your strength was actually the beginning of God moving in ways that are already unfolding around you, even if you cannot recognize them yet. And sometimes the greatest confirmation that your prayer was heard is not a sudden miracle, but a growing sense that something inside you refuses to lose hope, and that feeling is not accidental, and it is not emotional imagination but spiritual. Evidence that God has already started answering in ways you are going to understand very soon, because there are blessings that arrive suddenly and there are answers that appear quietly, but there are also moments when God begins aligning people, situations, opportunities, protection and timing all at once behind the scenes, so that when the answer finally appears you realize it could not have happened any other way except through divine timing. And what you whispered last night activated something that has already begun moving toward you even now, and the reason your prayer carried so much weight is because it was honest and it was real, and it came from a place deeper than routine words, and heaven always responds to prayers that come from that place, because God is not looking for perfect sentences, He is listening for honest hearts. And last night your heart spoke clearly and heaven heard every part of it, including the words you could not say and including the emotions you could not explain, and including the tears you tried to hide, because nothing about your prayer was wasted and nothing about your moment of weakness was ignored, and nothing about your situation is beyond what God is already preparing to transform. And even though today may still look ordinary, something extraordinary has already started moving closer to your life, and the same God who heard your whisper last night is already arranging the answer that will remind you why you were told to keep believing even when everything felt uncertain, and why you were given strength to keep praying even when your voice felt tired, and why your spirit refused to stop hoping even when your circumstances looked unchanged. Because what God begins in quiet moments He reveals in powerful ways at the right time, and the prayer you whispered last night was not the end of your story, but the beginning of a chapter you are going to look back on very soon and realize it was the moment everything started changing in ways you could never have imagined before. And what you need to understand right now is that the prayer you whispered last night did not disappear into silence the moment your lips stopped moving, because heaven does not measure your prayer by how loud your voice sounded or how perfect your words were, but by how honest your heart was when you spoke them. And that quiet moment when you felt like nobody was listening was actually the moment God leaned closest to you, because there are prayers people speak during the day just to feel better. But there are prayers whispered in the dark when your heart is tired, your strength is low, and your faith feels fragile, and those are the prayers that move heaven the most. And the reason you felt something different last night, even if you could not explain it, even if nothing changed around you yet, even if your situation still looks exactly the same today, is because something shifted in the spiritual world the moment you trusted God enough to speak honestly to Him instead of pretending to be strong. And you may not realize it yet, but heaven always responds to honest surrender faster than it responds to perfect words, because God is not waiting for impressive sentences, He is waiting for a real heart. And last night when you whispered that prayer, you were not just talking, you were releasing something heavy you had been carrying for too long, and the moment you released it, God began moving in places you cannot see yet, because sometimes the biggest answers begin in silence before they appear in reality. And what makes this moment powerful is that God already knew what you were going to whisper before you even closed your eyes and spoke it, but He still waited for you to say it, because prayer is not about informing God, it is about inviting Him into the situation you cannot control anymore. And the reason your spirit feels different right now while you are listening to this message is because something inside you already recognizes that change has started, even if your eyes cannot confirm it yet. And that feeling you have right now is not coincidence, it is confirmation, because God never allows a prayer spoken from a tired but faithful heart to return empty. And the truth most people never realize is that the prayers whispered late at night are often the prayers that begin the biggest turning points in a person's life, because those are the moments when pride disappears, distractions disappear, and only honesty remains between you and God. And honesty is where miracles begin. And What you thought was just another quiet night was actually a divine appointment arranged before you were even born, because God knew there would be a moment in your life when you would finally stop pretending to handle everything alone and instead whisper His name with real dependence and real trust. And that moment happened last night, and even though nothing around you looked different when you woke up this morning, something inside your story quietly changed direction, because God does not wait until everything looks perfect before He begins working. He begins working the moment you surrender control. And what makes this even more powerful is that some of the answers to your prayer did not begin last night. They actually began days ago, weeks ago, maybe even months ago. But last night was the moment heaven connected those preparations to your faith, because God often prepares the answer before the prayer is even spoken. And what you are about to see in the coming days will not feel random. It will feel intentional. It will feel guided. It will feel like doors opening at the exact moment you needed them. And that is because God never listens passively when His children whisper His name in the dark. He responds intentionally, carefully, and personally in ways that prove He was listening the entire time, even when it felt quiet and even when you thought nothing was happening. God was already arranging people, already moving situations, already aligning opportunities, already protecting you from things you never even knew were coming toward you. And one day, very soon, you are going to look back at that whisper you spoke last night and realize it was not just a prayer, it was the beginning of a shift that changed everything in your life. Folded hands, because sometimes the smallest whisper creates the loudest miracle, and sometimes the quietest surrender opens the biggest door. And right now, without even realizing it, you are standing closer to your answer than you have ever been before. And what you are beginning to realize right now is something most people never understand until much later in their lives, because there comes a moment when the prayer you whispered in your weakest night begins to move heaven in ways you cannot see yet but can already feel inside your spirit. And even though your situation may still look the same on the outside, something invisible has already started shifting around you. And the reason you suddenly feel different even without visible evidence is because God never touches your heart without preparing your future at the same time. And that quiet peace you are feeling right now is not random, and it is not imagination, and it is not coincidence, because it is the first sign that your prayer has already reached places your eyes cannot reach yet, and God is already arranging answers in ways you never expected. And what makes this moment powerful is that heaven often begins working long before the breakthrough becomes visible on earth. And that means what you are standing inside right now is not delay but preparation, and not silence but strategy, and not rejection but redirection towards something greater than what you originally asked for. Because sometimes the reason God stays quiet after you pray is not because He ignored you, but because He is building something too big to rush, and too important to interrupt, and too perfect to release before its appointed time. And the truth is, there are things already moving behind the scenes of your life that you would not believe if you could see them all at once, because God is aligning people who have never met you yet, preparing opportunities that were not available before, opening doors you never even knew existed, and removing obstacles you thought would stay forever. And this is why the pressure you have been feeling recently is not punishment but positioning, because right before elevation there is always stretching, and right before transformation there is always discomfort, and right before answers appear there is always a season where faith must grow stronger than fear. And what makes your story different is that you did not stop praying when things became confusing, and you did not walk away when things became slow, and you did not lose hope when things became quiet. And heaven noticed that persistence, and heaven responds to that kind of faith, because God never ignores a heart that keeps trusting Him even when circumstances try to convince it otherwise. And what you are Experiencing right now is the moment where your patience is turning into purpose and your waiting is turning into movement and your tears are turning into testimony, and even though nobody around you may understand what is changing inside you, there is already a new strength rising in your spirit, and that strength is not coming from your situation improving but from your faith expanding, because God is teaching you how to stand before He shows you where you are going and how to trust before He reveals what is coming and how to believe before He proves what He promised. And the reason this matters right now is because something unexpected is closer to you than you think, and what once felt impossible is slowly becoming inevitable, and what once looked closed is quietly being reopened, and what once looked delayed is secretly being accelerated in ways only heaven can arrange. And this is why you cannot measure your progress by what you see today, because God measures progress by what He is preparing for tomorrow. And sometimes the biggest evidence that your prayer was heard is not an immediate answer but a sudden shift in your spirit that gives you peace even before results appear. And if you listen carefully to your heart right now, you will notice something different inside you, because fear is losing its voice and doubt is losing its control and hope is becoming stronger again. And that is not accidental, because hope is always the first sign that something new is already beginning. And what makes this season powerful is that you are not standing where you used to be anymore, even if it still looks familiar around you, because growth often happens quietly before it becomes visible publicly. And the reason God allowed you to reach this exact moment is because you are stronger than you were before, wiser than you were before, and closer to your breakthrough than you have ever been before. And even though the journey has not been easy and the waiting has not been comfortable and the silence has not always made sense, it was never wasted, because every unanswered moment was shaping a future that needed the version of you that exists today and not the version you were yesterday. And this is why something inside you kept pushing you forward even when you wanted to stop, because your spirit already recognized that what is coming next is worth everything you had to walk through to reach this point. And the most powerful truth you can hold on to right now is that God never lets a prayer disappear without purpose, and never allows a faithful heart to wait without reason, and never keeps a door closed unless something greater is being prepared behind another one. And what you are about to witness in your life will make sense of every confusing moment you survived, and every silent night you endured, and every tear you thought nobody saw, because heaven was listening even when the world was not responding, and God was working even when nothing around you seem to change. And what you feel right now is the beginning of that answer finally moving closer toward you. And what makes this moment even more important for you right now is something many people never recognize while they are living inside it, because there comes a point in every spiritual journey where the answer you have been praying for does not arrive suddenly like lightning, but instead begins to unfold quietly like sunrise. And the reason God allows it to happen this way is because the blessings that truly change your life are not meant to shock your future but prepare your heart for what is coming next. And what you are feeling in this season is not confusion but transition, and not delay but alignment, and not silence but preparation, happening at a level deeper than what your eyes can see, because heaven never moves randomly and God never responds late. And even when it feels like nothing is happening, there are things already shifting around your life that are too important to happen quickly and too powerful to be released before the exact moment they are meant to appear. And the truth There are doors opening right now that you cannot see yet, conversations being arranged that you have not heard yet, opportunities forming that you never expected yet, and people being positioned in your path who will play a role in the answer you once whispered during a night when nobody else understood what you were carrying inside your heart. And what makes this season so different from the ones you have already survived is that this time the change is not only happening around you but also inside you, because God never changes your situation without first strengthening your spirit, and never releases a blessing that your heart is not ready to carry, and never moves you forward until your faith becomes stronger than your fear. And the reason you feel this quiet confidence beginning to grow inside you even without visible proof is because heaven is already confirming something your eyes have not seen yet, and your spirit is recognizing movement before your circumstances reveal it. And that is one of the clearest signs that your prayer did not disappear into silence but entered into preparation, and the preparation you are standing inside right now is shaping the exact future that once felt impossible to imagine. And even though there were moments when you questioned whether anything was changing, and even though there were nights when it felt like your voice was disappearing into emptiness, and even though there were days when doubt tried to convince you that nothing would ever shift in your favor, the truth is God was never distant, and heaven was never quiet, and your prayer was never ignored, because sometimes the most powerful answers begin forming long before the visible evidence arrives, and sometimes the strongest breakthroughs begin growing underneath the surface before they ever appear above it. And what you are walking through right now is one of those moments where everything that once looked delayed is quietly being repositioned into perfect timing, and everything that once felt closed is being redirected towards something greater, and everything that once made you feel uncertain is being transformed into clarity step by step, because God does not lead His people into confusion but through preparation, and does not allow waiting seasons to exist without purpose, and does not place faith inside your heart without planning a future strong enough to receive it. And this is why something inside you kept telling you not to give up even when the situation looked unchanged. And even when people around you stopped believing, and even when circumstances tried to convince you to stop expecting anything new, because your spirit already recognized that the answer you prayed for did not disappear but simply began traveling through a process that required patience before it could become visible. And what you are about to witness next in your life will not only confirm that your prayer was heard, but will also show you that every step you took while trusting God was moving you closer to something bigger than what you originally asked for. And what makes that truth so powerful right now is that you are standing closer to that moment than you realize, because heaven never brings a heart this far without preparing something ahead, and never builds this level of faith without planning a future strong enough to match it, and never allows this much waiting without arranging a breakthrough that will eventually make every silent moment make sense. And even though you cannot yet see the full picture of what is forming around your life, there is already movement happening that cannot be stopped, and there is already alignment taking place that cannot be reversed, and there is already purpose unfolding that cannot be delayed any longer, because the season you are entering now is not the same season you were surviving before, and the next chapter of your story is already beginning, even if the evidence has not appeared yet. And what you are about to experience will not only answer your prayer but also strengthen your faith in a way that changes how you see every future challenge from this moment forward. Because once you witness how God moves after a season of silence, you never doubt His timing again, and once you understand how heaven responds after a season of waiting, you never question His presence again. And what is coming toward your life right now is the beginning of that understanding finally becoming real in ways you will never forget. And right now there is something happening in your life that you cannot fully explain, but deep inside your spirit you can feel that things are not the same anymore, because the same situations that once discouraged you no longer have the same power over your heart, and the same voices that once made you doubt yourself no longer sound as loud as they used to. And this is not a coincidence, but a clear sign that God is already changing something inside you before He changes what is around you, because every true transformation that comes from heaven always begins within your spirit before it becomes visible in your circumstances. And the reason you have been feeling this quiet strength growing inside you lately is because God has been preparing you for a shift that is closer than you think. And even though your eyes still see delays, and even though your plans may not have unfolded the way you expected them to, and even though there were moments when you wondered if God had forgotten about the prayers you whispered late at night when nobody else was listening, the truth is that heaven never ignored a single word you spoke, and not one tear you cried went unnoticed, because the same God who formed you with purpose is the same God who has been carefully arranging moments in your life that will soon begin to connect in ways you never imagined. And what once felt like confusion will suddenly begin to make sense, and what once looked like rejection will reveal itself as protection, and what once looked like loss will reveal itself as preparation for something far greater than what you originally asked for. Because sometimes God answers your prayers not by giving you what you requested immediately, but by shaping you into the person who can carry what He is about to release into your life. And the reason this season has felt longer than expected is not because you were forgotten, but because what God is preparing for you requires a stronger version of you to receive it without fear, without doubt, and without returning to the limitations of your past. And right now, even though you may not realize it yet, your mindset is already changing, your patience is already growing, your faith is already becoming deeper than it was before. And that quiet growth happening inside you is the evidence that God is not finished with your story. And the reason you are still here, the reason you are still standing, the reason your hope did not completely disappear even during the hardest nights is because God placed something unshakable inside your spirit that refuses to give up even when your situation looks uncertain. And what you must understand in this moment is that there is a difference between a delay that comes from fear and a delay that comes from divine timing. And the delay you are experiencing right now is not meant to stop you, but to strengthen you, because there are blessings that arrive quickly and there are blessings that arrive prepared, and the ones that arrive prepared are the ones that change your entire life forever. And the truth is that if everything you asked for had happened earlier, you would not have been ready to carry it without stress, confusion, or pressure. But now, after everything you have walked through, after every moment you chose to keep believing, even when you were tired, even when you were disappointed, even when nobody else understood what you were feeling, God has been quietly building a foundation inside you that cannot be shaken by temporary problems or unexpected setbacks. And what is coming next into your life will not be something fragile or temporary, but something stable, something meaningful, something that will confirm to your heart that the waiting season was never wasted, because God never wastes a season that He allows you to walk through. And even the moments that felt silent were moments where heaven was still moving in your favor, even when you could not see it, even when you could not feel it, even when you almost stopped expecting anything to change. Because the truth is that God often works in ways that your eyes cannot recognize until the exact moment when everything suddenly begins to come together. And when that moment arrives, you will realize that every closed door protected you, every unexpected pause redirected you, and every quiet season strengthened you in ways that prepared you for the opportunity that is now closer to you than it has ever been before. And what makes this moment so important in your life right now Is that something inside you has already started shifting even if your circumstances have not fully changed yet, because the moment your faith becomes stronger than your fear is the moment your breakthrough begins moving toward you faster than before, and God has been guiding your steps even on the days when you thought you were walking alone, and He has been protecting your future even on the days when your present felt uncertain, and the reason you are still moving forward today is because your story is not over, your purpose is not finished, and your blessing is not cancelled, but it is being prepared in ways that will soon become clear to you at exactly the right time. And when that moment arrives, you will look back at this season not with disappointment but with gratitude, because you will finally understand that God was never late. He was simply working in a way that ensured your next chapter would be stronger, brighter, and more meaningful than anything you could have created on your own. Sparkle's folded hands, and the most powerful thing you can do right now is keep trusting, keep believing, and keep moving forward one step at a time, because what is coming into your life next is not ordinary, it is intentional, it is prepared, and it is closer than you think. Listen carefully right now, because there is something happening in your life at this very moment that you cannot fully see yet, but your spirit has already started to recognize it. And the reason you are still here listening to this message instead of walking away like so many others is because heaven is trying to prepare your heart for a shift that is closer than you think, and what you once called delay is slowly revealing itself as protection, and what you once called silence is turning into direction, and what you once called weakness is becoming strength that will carry you into a season you were not ready for before, but you are ready for now, because God never wastes pain, and He never allows tears to fall without purpose. And every night you cried when nobody understood you, and every prayer you whispered when your voice was shaking, and every moment you almost gave up but somehow kept moving forward anyway, has been recorded in heaven and is now becoming part of the foundation for what God is about to release into your life. And the reason things started changing inside you before they changed around you is because transformation always begins in the invisible before it appears in the visible. And what you are feeling lately is not confusion but preparation, and it is not restlessness but positioning, and it is not fear but awareness that something different is approaching your life. And even though people around you may still see the old version of you, God is already working with the new version of you, and that is why certain conversations no longer feel right, and certain environments no longer feel comfortable, and certain relationships no longer feel peaceful, because when God prepares you for elevation, He begins by separating you from everything that cannot grow with you. And even though separation sometimes feels lonely, it is actually sacred, because God never removes something without making space for something greater, and what feels empty right now is not loss, but room being created for blessings that are too big to fit inside your old life, and too powerful to be handled by your old mindset, and too important to be trusted with your old habits. And this is why your spirit has been pulling you toward deeper faith lately, even when your circumstances have not changed yet, because faith always moves before evidence appears, and obedience always comes before understanding, and breakthrough always begins before announcement. And what you are stepping into next will not look like anything you have experienced before, because God is not repeating your past, He is rewriting your future. And the doors that stayed closed in front of you were never meant to stop you, they were meant to redirect you. And the people who walked away from you were never meant to destroy you, they were meant to release you. And the opportunities that disappeared from your hands were never meant to limit you, they were meant to prepare your hands to receive something greater and stronger and more aligned with the calling placed on your life before you were even born. And there is a reason your heart keeps telling you not to give up right now, even though things still look uncertain, because heaven does not speak to your eyes first, it speaks to your spirit first. And what your spirit is sensing right now is confirmation that you are closer to your breakthrough than you have ever been before, and the pressure you felt recently was not meant to break you but to build capacity inside you so you could carry the weight of the blessing that is coming, because the next season of your life will require a stronger mindset, a deeper faith, a clearer vision, and a more courageous heart. And God has been quietly developing all of that inside you while you thought nothing was happening, and this is the moment where everything begins to make sense, not all at once but step by step, as doors begin opening in unexpected ways and clarity begins replacing confusion and peace begins replacing anxiety and confidence begins replacing doubt. And when that moment arrives, you will look back at this season and realize that God was not ignoring you, He was preparing you, and He was not delaying you, He was aligning you, and He was not leaving you, He was leading you towards something that required a stronger version of you than the one you used to be. And the truth is, your story is not slowing down right now, it is building momentum in ways you cannot measure yet. And what is coming next will not only change your situation, but it will change the way you see yourself forever, because God is not just improving your life, He is transforming your identity so you can walk boldly into the purpose that has been waiting for you all along. And the moment you fully step into that purpose, everything that once confused you will suddenly begin to make sense, and you will finally understand why you had to go through everything you went through to become the person you are becoming right now.